So to become a glider pilot, I started going out to my club each weekend, and that continued probably for 3 or 4 months. And I think I probably did 30 or 40 flights over about 10 hours of actual time in the air. And then you progress to a standard where the instructor stops getting in the back of the glider anymore and you go off by yourself.
4, all out, all out.
Compared to powered aviation, which I've subsequently done a little bit of, I've got my private pilot license now, it's really pretty easy. Once you learn how to take off and land, it's quite straightforward. The difficult part is learning to fly fast. Typically when we're racing our gliders, we're going 200 to 220 kilometres an hour, and they can go much faster than that, even 250, 280 kilometres an hour. In fact, I got to fly a glider when I was in the US that went to 400 kilometres an hour, I think. So that can be quite fast compared to a lot of other sports. When I first started gliding, taking off and landing was still pretty scary, and when you return quite steeply and you can see down the wing at the ground down there, it certainly felt pretty uncomfortable. It doesn't take long before you get used to it. And particularly doing things like a little bit of aerobatics like that really increases your confidence in the glider once you've seen the world upside down over and over and over again. There's lots of reasons someone might be interested in gliding. It might be that they're on their way into a career in aviation and they just want it as a cheap way to build hours up for their flying. It might be a new hobby for them, they're interested in the atmosphere, they're interested in flying in general, and gliding is a very affordable way to fly even if you don't want to go anywhere with it. And it might be people like racing, because gliding is an extremely competitive sport. People start training to fly gliders at all kinds of ages. I think the youngest anyone's ever gone solo is about 13. In Australia, I believe it's 15. But really, for basic gliding, taking off and landing, it's really very easy to do. It's much easier than, say, driving a car. When we go gliding, we're typically looking for thermals, which are little bubbles of hot air that have separated from the ground and risen up. There's lots of ways we can find thermals. The most common way is clouds form on top of them. So typically the clouds you see in the sky are the top of a thermal where that hot air has risen up to its condensation level and formed a cloud. The other principle is what we call the blind man in the forest theory, which is if you just fly along for long enough, you're bound to hit one. Typically gliders in Australia fly from about 0 feet to 10,000 feet, so that's about 0 to 3,000 metres, but it's quite possible to go much higher than that. So people who are flying in wave, which is those standing waves forming on the mountains, they might typically go up to 5 to 10 kilometres high, sometimes even much higher than that. And there's actually a project at the moment to send a glider up to 30 kilometres high. The highest I've ever been in a glider was about 23,000 feet, and that was flying out of Wilpena Pound in the Flinders Ranges in North-South Australia. You get a real sense of vertigo, where you just feel a little bit uncomfortable at how high you are over the earth and how the earth, from that position when you move forward, it feels like you're just stationary, so it's quite a weird feeling. The longest I've been flying for is about 9 hours or so, and people have done 16, 17 hours. My longest flight is 1,250 kilometres, and I think the world record is up there in the high 2000s. You get to choose the level of risk you want to take. If you want to go flying on a Sunday, or go flying with a friend, or do some distance flying, there's really very, very little risk. If you can't make it back to the aerodrome, usually you need to outland, which is landing in a field or something like that. So you get to sit and wait in a paddock for someone to come pick you up with a trailer, you've got to pull your glider apart, put it in the trailer, drive it back to your airfield, put it back together. It's a big hassle, but usually it's drama-free. Like all of the paddocks over the terrain we fly over are big wide open paddocks. The farmers usually don't mind. It's just open crops, so there's no damage or anything like that. Gliding can open a lot of opportunities for young people interested in aviation, in that the hours you spend in gliders transfer directly towards any other form of aviation licence you're working towards. And to build up those hours when you're renting a Cessna at $300 an hour, that's a lot of money. Whereas flying gliders, you can rent a glider at your club often for $20 an hour, or you can purchase a glider for as little as $10,000 or $12,000, and you can rack up those hours really, really quickly, spending almost nothing. Gliding can be a very expensive sport. It depends what you want to get out of it. There's no requirement that says you need to spend a certain amount of money to have a certain amount of fun. People have just as much fun in their $5,000 gliders as they do in their $1 million gliders. If you want to go fly Sundays at your club, you can be up for $20 a week. The things I like most about gliding are the freedom, the experience of being up there and playing with the atmosphere and the weather, interacting with the clouds, the adventure, and sort of the problem-solving aspect of it, in that every day the weather's serving up a different problem and you get to go up there and solve it. It certainly offers you some pretty spectacular ways to explore new countries. Countries like New Zealand are just amazing to explore from the air, and you could explore them in ways you'd never be able to do by car. We had the Junior World Championships in Australia last year, which was a big opportunity for me. It was my final year as a junior. I had the right glider for the class. I was familiar flying from that area, living in the same state, and that worked out really well for me. So we had a great team going into it, and we ended up with a great result, which was me being the world champion. I'm currently competing at the World Championships in Benalla, Australia, which is being held here for the second time ever, and the first time was about 30 years ago in 1987. A typical task, particularly at the World Championships, will be somewhere between 300 and 600 kilometres, and it'll be a sequence of turn points you have to go to. After this competition, I'd like to go back to sort of where I started, which is more distance flying and record flying and adventure soaring. So I'm hoping to find a motor glider or something like that and go do things like fly the Morning Glory, which is a cloud formation we get in the Gulf of Carpentaria, or fly the Great Australian Bight, which is this enormous ridge line that runs right next to the ocean in southern Western Australia. Or perhaps go fly in the mountains somewhere and just have some adventures for a while and take a bit of a break from competitions. If you think you might be interested in it as well, I encourage you to go down to your local club and give it a try. I'm sure someone will take you for a trial flight and see if you like it as much as I do.